You're here joining us today for the Compliance Gap webinar with myself and Katharine. So thank you so much all for joining us. Before we kick off, a few introductions into the organizations who are bringing this webinar to you all, and also for myself and Katharine as speakers. Who are we? So first of all, Posturite is one of the companies that are bringing this webinar to you today. Posturite are experts in DSE assessments, as well as evidence-based MSK and wellbeing programs. So if you don't know of Posturite, hopefully you do now, and they support companies from all sizes when it comes to anything MSK related. Um, so that's Posturite. And then second, we have Ocushield. Ocushield's an eye care company. We support organizations when it comes to all things eyes, including things like medically rated screen filters that help comfort and reduce glare from screen time, to managing eye care vouchers and online eye screening to support any eye care provisions for corporates as well. Now, on to the speakers. I'll hand over to Catherine to introduce herself.
I think a lot of people on the call might know me. I'm Katharine. I sort of lead up the ergonomics at Posturite. I'm a bit of an old timer, as it were, and I think probably just to say I was actually working in this field when the DSE regulations came out. So I'm still here. So there's still some work to be done, which I hope to sort of talk about with Dhruvin today. So yes, that's really my background.
Thank you, Catherine. And for you those that don't know me, my background is clinical, similar to Catherine, but from an eye perspective. So I'm an optometrist by trade, and everything I do obsesses around supporting consumers and employees look after their eyes and vision to ensure that they can have the most productive day, but also support their well-being. And I'm also one of the co-founders at Ocushield as well. All right, so Catherine, should we kick off with a fireside chat?
Well, I think we should actually. And as I said, I have been around since I remember the sort of lead up to the regulations coming out and the kerfuffle that went on, particularly about eyesight when it came out in 1992. But really, the regs have been around, as I say, for a very long time. Can we now do better than just meeting those requirements, do you think?
Certainly, I think so. In a nutshell, I mean, especially since the pandemic, where we know I think the regulations were somewhat adapted. It took a bit of time, as we all know, when the pandemic came in. But we've not had any more real, I believe, substance for this modern hybrid working way to really support employees when it comes to, I guess, DSE regulation, especially from you know, from an eye care lens, right? I think we're now working longer than ever. Actually, before I share on that, Tom, can you share the stats on the poll results actually? Because that should hopefully
Ooh.
support what we're talking about. Okay, great. So we've got 64% the bulk of organizations, employees utilizing screens, 6 to 8 hours during a day, and then 19% 8 hours more. In a working day, we have 8 hours. So to see these stats, I'm not surprised. But as I mentioned, we are now working in a different way. We've got multiple screens, multiple ways folk are being reached to, from line managers contacting people out of hours through different communications. I think things have changed significantly, and I think we can be doing better. And it requires a little bit more of a holistic and proactive approach. And Catherine, you'll probably know better than me, but I think the best health and safety and facilities managers and HR coordinators are doing things that maybe go above and beyond the regulations because they understand their people and the requirements that are there. So yeah, I think a thought back to you, Catherine. What are you seeing out there that folk are going above and beyond that are superseding the current regulations?
I think people are, but I'm not sure they're necessarily recognizing that it's anything to do with the regs. And I think perhaps just going back to what I was saying is, I think we forget why the regulations were brought in. It's regulations, whatever else. But I think if we think about it, the regulations were brought in for a reason. They were brought in for a reason because we had seen that the way people were working was affecting their musculoskeletal health and their eye health, and this was work related. And they thought, we're seeing problems. We need to do something about it. So we brought the regs in. Okay, but the way we were working when the regs were brought in and the way we are working now is very different. So we need to sort of flex, I think, from that point of view.
Yeah, totally, totally. And Catherine, if you could if you could sit in a board meeting for 10 minutes, in any organizations at the moment, what would you want leaders to understand about DSE risk that they may currently, underestimate?
I think it's almost that in the fact that, we talk about DSC compliance, we talk about regulations. But again, going back to why do we have these regulations? Because if we don't get it right, it's bad for people's health, but actually it's also bad for the bottom line. If people are distracted by pain, they're not going to be working well. If people can't see clearly what's going on the screen, they're not going to be efficient. So I'd like to sort of try and bring people back to it's not just about making sure you're compliant. Of course, compliance is there for a reason, but actually it is fundamental to actually the health of people and health of business to make sure people can get on with their jobs. So yes, I'd really like to sort of, I suppose, pare it back and say there's a really good reason why we're talking about these things because it affects us all. So I'm afraid I would be up there at the board meeting, bashing the table and saying that sort of thing.
Love it, love it. And why do you think DSE ends up often, being a one-off assessment rather than an ongoing habit? What have you seen work to make it, how we work rather than what we file or report on?
I think partly it is seen as a health and safety thing. And we have health and safety processes, and quite rightly it falls within those processes. But as we've been discussing, it goes beyond that. It is more ingrained in what we do. So I think we do need those checks and balances. We do need to make sure it is done, but we have to remember why we're doing it. Um, and as work changes, as understanding people and the way they work changes, we have to flex what compliance is necessary, if you see what I mean. So that it's back, I'm afraid, to the understanding of why we're doing what we're doing. It's not a one-off tick box. It's actually we're making a difference here. And if we make a difference, it needs to be more of an ongoing thing and a conversational type thing. So, I'm going to come back to you, so as things have changed, what do you think the barriers are to looking after our vision at work these days? Things have changed a lot, haven't they?
They have indeed, yeah. I think some of the barriers um, definitely come from a perspective of what employees believe that they can control and they can't control. And what I mean by that is we we're all thinking about our eyes when we have issues, whether it's eye strain or fatigue. Um, but we're not really thinking about them proactively. There's a really interesting research paper that asks the public what's the least sense that they'd like to lose out of, hearing, vision, smell, taste. And the results overwhelmingly are people would least like to lose their vision, right? They want to be able to see so they can do the best possible work, see their loved ones, to enjoy the color of the life. But most people don't do anything about their vision to support and look after their eyes, right? And I think one barrier is actually individuals themselves realizing that again, you can wait until something goes wrong for you to support your vision, but actually it's that proactive piece that's supporting your eyes and reducing some of those day-to-day burdens. So I think one thing is how do we communicate that message to employees that being proactive is going to help support them in the long run. And the reason I mention that, and I'll share some data that we picked up on screen now, and actually what organizations are facing. And this was a report from Bupa that was released not too long ago, and it looked at, in the last 12 months, 5,000 respondents from a YouGov survey from those that are in tech companies, and you can assume tech companies are those that are office based, right? And the majority of those employees that were suffering, 38% of them were suffering with eye strain and headaches. And unfortunately, for us to support those with eye strain and headaches, you've got to take a proactive approach, and employees have to really look at one, have they had their last eye exam, within a reasonable time? And 24% of the UK's population have never had an eye exam or had one in the last 5 years. We know also in the UK, 2 million people, according to DVLA, are driving without the legal requirements to see, right? So there's people that also, this is a tip. If you're driving, if you do see a car, they might not be able to see you. So yeah, everyone just pay attention to that in one capacity. So I think something starts with the employees, and it's the employers' job now, I believe, for us to be able to communicate better to employees and their workforce to say, right, we've got provisions in place to access eye care, for example. You should be doing that versus not doing that. Because at the moment, traditionally, most of the employees that engage with eye exams within the workforce are those that only wear glasses. And that's only about a third of the working population. There's two-thirds of organizations folk that don't engage because they don't wear glasses and they feel they can see perfectly. So yeah, that's what I'd say is one of the key barriers is that kind of behavioral change, that understanding that we need to have at the moment.
I mean, do you think that people are aware of early signs of digital eye strain? And do you think actually they know how to prevent it? Do you think, we're doing a good job in helping people with this?
Um, I think, most people at the moment, they understand when they have eye strain and fatigue, but they don't have a solution for it. And I'll share some more stats here. 90% of screen-based users suffer from something known as digital eye strain. So that's your tired eyes, fatigue, headaches, etc. But at the moment, what employees do, the only way they solve it is to take time off work. They have a break, right? We do recommend breaks, and that's great. But again, most people take breaks when it's too late, once they have the symptoms. They're not taking breaks proactively. But what it means to organizations is, and Deloitte shared this research, is, due to vision issues, including digital eye strain, employees are taking up to 4.1 days off every year. That's because they take, on average, 40 minutes off during a day through extending their lunch break or closing their laptop early, for example, or monitor. And this means that folk are really struggling with digital eye strain and fatigue, but as I said, they don't have a solution. And there's a couple things that employees could do straight away to reduce some of the digital eye strain. One is lighting. So the brightness of screens, if you reduce the brightness of your screen, that's going to reduce the intensity of that light source, which then helps your visual system to function. Less resources required there. Proximity to screen. So I always say, an arm's length away screen should be at a minimum. The further away they are, the better. To one aspect, and that's because when your eyes look at something close up, if I look at my finger here, my eyes converge, they come together, and they use something known as accommodation, and that requires more power from our visual system. And if we're doing that 8 hours a day, I mean, our eyes and visual system was not made to look at something for 8 hours a day, right? If we look at our ancestors and the caveman days, we were out and about foraging and, wider, right? We were looking at horizons. So that's changed significantly, and that's contributing to that digital eye strain and problem that we have at the moment.
I think it's quite interesting. I believe, and you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong. I think there's quite a lot of research showing how eyes are trying to change because of so much indoor work and close work we're doing, not just screens, but just all these things. But unfortunately, the change in ourselves takes an awful lot longer than what we have going on around us, don't we? So it's going to it's not even going to be close to be able to sort of keep up with that. So
Yeah, totally. And there's
yeah.
there's tons of research now that are showing children there's a myopia epidemic
Mm.
because they're growing up this close to screens, it's meaning that they're changing their whole eye biology, and it means there's going to be more people wearing glasses than I think half the world's population by 2050 will need spectacles because of this change in how the world is at the moment.
Yeah.
Um, but Catherine, I guess a lot of employers solve DSE now by buying equipment, for example. What are the top mistakes companies make when they treat ergonomics as a purchasing exercise instead of systems and a behavior change problem?
I think, it can be very costly for a start because so often, you buy equipment. If you don't set it up correctly, you don't use the equipment, it is a waste of money, it's a waste of resources. Some people, they try and specify what equipment can have, and it doesn't work for the new ways of working. It might have worked for a shared office, but maybe it doesn't work for a home. Um, and then, even you can get the best equipment, but if you don't use it correctly, if you don't set up equipment, if you could have the most expensive screen, for example, and as you said, if you have it blaring out full brightness, you're still going to land up with problems. So it we need to be far more tailored. Unfortunately, there isn't a one size fits all. And I think equipment tends to fall into that sort of almost one size fits all. We need to have a proper conversation. Um, a lot of it is habits, a lot of it is training. There will be some equipment, of course, there'll be some equipment. But we have to go slightly deeper than that to try and solve the problem. And we're going to need to keep revisiting it too, because our processes are changing and our people are changing. So it can't just be well, I've bought them a table and a chair and a laptop stand, and that'll be fine, because it might hit some people, but not everyone. So one could save oneself a lot of money and time if one actually thought a little bit broader than just equipment, I think is what I want to say. And I work for a company that sells equipment, so I think it's important to, if you're going to invest, you want to get it right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I
That,
think yeah, I just want to just sort of bring on that. I mean, hybrid working. I mean, you mentioned it earlier. You know, equipment for hybrid working, it has changed. But a hybrid working has made DSC completely so much harder to control. What do you think the most common, possibly, silent failures have you seen in the home setup particularly? Um, and they just don't seem to sort of make it to the assessment. Um, do you see home issues at all?
yeah, I mean, from a, I guess from an eye perspective, when we're working at in a home, we there's a lot of things that aren't in control. And what I mean by that is again, lighting above us or around us. Usually these things aren't covered. From a DSC assessment, there's guidance, but companies don't see that as their requirements that they need to solve. And actually, especially in the winter months, right, in the UK we get maximum 6 months of sun where we're getting natural light in, and that's great. But then the other 6 months people have, you jump on calls with, when you jump on calls with your colleagues and you've got bright garish light that's coming straight into your camera, again, there's all these things that you would consider, and I consider more from optometry. I go, wow, some people are working in either really dim light settings or either really bright white LED lighting, and both have their pros and cons, right? So for example, if you work in a dim lit environment, what happens is your pupils actually expand, and that by them expanding they want more light because they're struggling to see. But because that happens, and when you're looking at a screen, you're actually getting more visual aberrations, so it means that your visual system is going to have to work harder, and it's going to get more fatigued earlier than it would have um, uh, in other means. But on the other side, if you have really bright white LED lighting, it might be great for you in the morning and you have high attention, etc. But past midday, and especially when the sun sets in the winter, it's wreaking havoc on folks' circadian rhythms, for example, which is then affecting them how they work during the day, their mood, and wider. So for me, I think that one of the silent failures in a home setup is that lighting component for most folk.
I
And
think. I
Yeah,
think
good.
we don't design our home lighting. We design it as mood lighting, don't we? Rather
Yeah.
than work lighting.
Yes.
And that's quite a problem for us. And also, how we set ourselves up. I mean, as you know, I've been playing with my blind on the side. I am 90 degrees to the window, which is a good thing to do, but I've got brilliant sunlight coming in now, which is fantastic. But a lot of people, are sitting opposite a wall and they don't have that ability to change their focal distance, do they?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, very good point. And also it's also, a luxury to have, let's say, an office room in a home, right? Most people have multi-purpose rooms where they might be sharing as a bedroom or a kid's room, and that it's not 100% there for work, right? So it's one of those things there. And I guess Catherine, when you're investigating from your side reoccurring musculoskeletal complaints, um what are the surprising root causes that aren't obvious, and how often are they linked to the way people work rather than, let's say, the chair they sit on?
yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? That people always say, "Oh, back problem, it must be my chair," and it's like you look at the chairs often all right, but they then got the laptop on the desk, so they're leaning forwards, and so
Yeah.
they don't use the nice chairs they've got because all the weight is coming forward. So it's A plus B equals C sometimes. You just have to sort of unpeel it a wee bit because the cause is often not that obvious. And sometimes you see people with a wonderful setup, but then you find out that they're sitting there for an hour and a half and they're doing the same tasks over and over and over. So the setup could be marvelous, but the processes could be wrong. Or, somebody like myself, I struggle with adapting to new technology. And so I'll do things perhaps a long way round. And it's no matter how good my setup is, it's been taking a lot more effort from me to do that. Or maybe I don't know how to set up my screen correctly. So there's a lot of things that aren't obvious. And until you sit and talk to somebody or watch them work or investigate how they like to work, then those things start to come forwards. And it can be positional or it can be habits. We've all got awful habits, or it could just be that the way they're trying to achieve a task. So you have to dig a little bit deeper than going, well, I want them to be like this, and I want them to take a break every 20 minutes to do an eye break, and I need them to get up every 50 minutes. That doesn't work for everybody because everybody is so different these days. So I would like to see us do more training so people understand better, so they can then look at what they do themselves and actually try and problem solve for themselves. So I'd like to see us do something like that. It's not difficult. We just need a bit of time to think about it. I
Mm.
suppose is my question.
Interesting.
Um, so we found the time required to manage DSE concerns is a major issue for most people. When we did a survey recently, and we found out so what were the barriers. And in relation to digital eye strain and headaches and musculoskeletal disorders, you've got a screener, haven't you? How could that help reduce the time to manage? Because if time to manage is a barrier, do you have solutions for us?
Yeah, so exactly t 2.5 years ago, we looked at this problem in the corporate workspace, and we said, what are organizations doing when it comes to eyes? And most organizations say we either provide a voucher scheme or we expense eye exams, and we'll come on to the expensing eye exams in a bit because there's some compliance issues with that. But we said, okay, this is interesting. This is the only thing that's provided for eyes, and generally it's only people that wear spectacles that engage. And we said this, for this new screen obsessed world, we have to use screens to work. We're using our eyes. They're one of our key elements when it comes to working, but they're not being looked after. So what we did, we launched into a market, a screening solution. So within 4 minutes, employees, whether they're based in, and I'll share my screen so you can get a bit of a visual, but whether employees are based behind the office, on the go in a warehouse. They can screen their eyes in 4 minutes. And this is all accessible via a web URL, so no app is needed. And they can check for things like vision, or if you wear glasses, you can check your prescription, color vision, contrast sensitivity, astigmatism, depth perception, and a few other tests. And then it gives the output to the employee to say, right, things are looking good here. But if you are, suffering from digital eye strain, here's some eye yoga. We have some eye exercises to help them reduce those symptoms. But on the other hand, if things aren't looking well, if something's a problem, then we're then directing them into a primary care setting where they can get their eyes fully tested and support their eyes. And why this is really useful for people that aren't engaged with eye care provisions is we see many employees that believe they can see perfectly, and it's only, people that don't wear glasses never cover their eyes, and they don't do that because they think binocularly they can see very well, which is correct. But as soon as you cover one of your eyes, it shows you might have a weaker eye, and that weaker eye is being compensated by a good eye. But because you have that weaker eye that you might need glasses or you might have an issue, it's actually making it harder for you to work every day. And we've got countless testimonials from employees that have gone through the screening solution and gone, wow, I needed glasses for my full-time work, and now I've removed all those problems that I've had when working with screens, for example, or I found a IDs or abnormality. And that's the kind of behavioral change that we want to create within the workplace is how can we really support employees to understand if there's a problem and then do something about it. And then we deliver them an eye care voucher to an opticians like Specsavers where they can get that full eye examination, and therefore closing that loop from screening to full eye examination, to support employees in the workplace.
I suppose it also acts as a bit of a reassurance that if you're worried and you do the screener and you're okay, actually to go look for the problem elsewhere. So I think sometimes it's also a reassurance for those people that perhaps have got their eye health under control that something else is causing the concern that they need to get it looked at, don't they? So it probably goes both
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And as organizations, we think about we want our employees to be at work, right? We don't want to be sending them
Hmm.
off to eye exams or getting eye exams done too frequently. And in the same way as you said, if they need a bit of reassurance or they want to check, do I need to visit the opticians now? Then it's something that they can do. So we do get also glasses whereas engaging in that way. And 52% of employees reuse the service every 3 to 6 months. So as an optician, I know it's hard enough getting people back every 2 years. So for employees to engage in that way, it's really useful. And unfortunately, we have to use screens and a digital tool to engage people to test their eyes in that capacity. But it's better than not having a provision engaged with. And then I guess on the other side as well for you, Catherine, if an employer ever had to prove they had managed DSE properly, what evidence trail, do you expect to see? And what's typically missing in some of those cases?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the first thing I think anyone would ask would be, have you done risk assessments? That's the basis of our health and safety sort of compliance. Um, as I said when I first started this webinar, and I've been around a long time, and the biggest thing used to be I used to see lots and lots of files of risk assessments, but no action on the back of them. And a risk assessment without any action is a waste of time, unless everything's perfect, because you've put all the time in to find out the problems, but you haven't solved them. So for me, you need a risk assessment with some good follow-up actions. You would need to see that there is training, that is a requirement, but I'd like to see a good level of training, and appropriate for the work that's done now, because the training on setups, when you had one screen, one keyboard, one mouse, and it was in an office environment, it's different from what we have to do now with people working in different ways, and with different software too. So I would like to see a tailored risk assessment more these days as well. Um, and I think more and more we're looking to see that actually this point in time looking at a risk assessment, we could look at other things too about maybe people's preferences for working, where their strengths and weaknesses are, to enable us to, make sure they're not frustrated, but also hard nosed to get better work out of them too. Let's be honest. That's why you pay people to come to work, is to get them to do their work efficiently. So I think risk assessments, action plans, training. Obviously, we have to make sure that the eye health is looked after. We need to see that we offer people eyesight screening. It is a legal requirement. Um, and that corrective appliances are provided if that's necessary. We need to make sure that that's in place too. Um, for me, there's also one thing I would like to see, that there is a way for somebody to go, I'm concerned. Um, that for me is really, really important. People have a process often, but they don't know what to do if they have a concern. And so I'd like to see that that's in place. Not just for DSE, but for a lot of things. But since we're talking DSE here, I'd like people to be able to raise and say, "Do you know what? I'm struggling, and I need somebody to come and have a conversation with me to find out what the problem is."
Awesome.
Yeah. So really, that little extra step, I think, is definitely what's missing. Um, this is interesting. When okay, in days of yore, there was a big concerns about the costs of providing DSC assessments, sorry, eye screening assessments, and eye care and all sorts of things. Can you outline the tax implications of complying with DSC regulations around eyesight tests and corrective appliances? Because when we were talking, you brought some issues up that I was unaware of. So could you outline that? I'm sure people who are listening would be interested too.
Yeah, sure. So interestingly enough, since September, we've had one in three organizations contact us if they've had an expense policy in place for eye exams and glasses, saying that HMRC have opened an investigation. And we said, okay, this is interesting. And we started digging a little bit deeper. And what we found, so for any organization at the moment that expenses, the eye tests and glasses, and it sits with the finance team as a function, please do listen up. So, of course, you are doing a great thing by providing an eye exam and glasses to employees. But the legislation is quite strict, and the legislation says you should provide a bona fide eye examination, and you should also provide spectacles for those that need it for VDU use only. Now, those that have expense policies in place, they provide an eye exam fee, which is great, but they also provide a broad number, let's say like £75 or £100 towards glasses. Now, you as an organization are refunding a potential new set of glasses, and it could be for people that need glasses for both distance and their VDUs, or VDU and reading. Now, in those both cases, legally, you should not be providing a subsidy to those glasses. And what you're doing there is you're creating a benefit in kind issue, which then means that there's tax complications and that shouldn't have been provided to that employee. And it is really frustrating and it's really daft because, from my perspective, I'm going, great, an organization's doing more than they should be doing, right? Which is fantastic. But the reality is the legislation only wants to reimburse the employee for the VD use component only. So if you are an organization that is expensing eye tests and glasses, you should be looking towards moving that into a scheme or into a way where that can be managed, where if ever you needed to be audited, you can say, right, we have subsidized glasses for this employee and it was specifically for VD use only. If it sits with finance department and they're not managing it in a way where there's a checklist or a process where they're having to verify that, then that's going to open up issues for you and the organization.
I mean, this was quite a shock to me because, I mean, like yourself, when I used to go into clients and they would offer more than the minimum, I thought this is great. So yes, that was quite an interesting thing that was raised. So I'm glad you've made everyone aware of it. So
Yeah, no worries. We do have a one pager here which articulates that probably better than I have, and some sources and some documents and some information from accountants who are far more specialized in this area than I am. So we can circulate that if people want as well. Um, and yeah, Catherine, I guess if a company came to you and said, we're seeing more discomfort complaints and a drop in focus, what would be your first 30 days what would that look like and your phased approach look like to support this organization?
Gosh, I mean, um, it's quite a difficult one because obviously there's so many things. But I mean, the first thing I'd want to do is set up some sort of, as I said earlier, like red button hotline and say, right, first of all, let's see who's got a problem. Let's tackle the big problems first, and then we'll get some indication as to what the root problems are. So I'd like to do a sort of raise the profile and say, if this is a concern to you, please let us know. Um, Once we can do that, we can look at the trends. Is it then, your home workers? Is it your hybrid workers? Um, and then sort of dig a bit deeper into it. But I think one has to raise the profile, explain that things have changed. We've seen a concern. We need your help. We need you to interact with us, and then really sort of focus in on it. Um, and identify. Anyway, it could be training. Maybe they're not providing suitable training for the new software or the new way of working. So I think what investigation has to come first, and tackle the people with concerns first. I don't think everybody works so differently now. I don't think you could put in a plan without that investigation first. Um, and I think it fits in very much with the looking at the well-being of people these days too. And we know that, well-being and productivity go hand in hand. So, if you've got a spike in complaints, you know that your productivity is going to be struggling. So it's got to be a priority, isn't it? So,
Absolutely.
yeah, that would be my mantra is get the information out there, get the knowledge from the people that are struggling, deal with it, and look for the trends and try and plug those trends. Very much so. But
Brilliant.
so really, there's a couple of things. As an expert in eye health, what's the most frequent question you get?
Oh, I get I get this question a fair bit. It's if I wear glasses, is it going to make my eyes worse? Uh, surprisingly. Um, and it's a very complicated question to answer. But there's two lines of thought. I say, um, if you have a sufficient prescription. And when I mean by sufficient prescription, both for distance and reading, if it's reasonable and you'll know if it's reasonable, because your optician will say, oh, you kind of need glasses, you kind of don't. That means that it's an unreasonable prescription and you don't need to worry about it. But if they say you need to wear glasses for either distance or reading, that means you have a reasonable prescription. You should be wearing glasses and your vision is not going to deteriorate because you're wearing glasses. All right. What happens is when you wear glasses and then when you take them off, your brain realizes the difference in the clarity and what it can see versus when it can't. So then people tend to start realizing that, oh, I think my vision's getting worse. It's just no, your brain's realizing that you can clearly differentiate between the two different clarity and quality of the image you're seeing. Now, if you're someone that's in the unreasonable part of a prescription where the optician goes, yeah, this could help, this might not. I always challenge patients and folk to say, well, actually, persevere without them and try to actually see what you're trying to see. And I know that sounds a bit silly, but it means trying to focus in on where you're seeing to really challenge the brain. I'll give you an example. When you're looking at distance and you can't see, do squint because it makes the aperture size smaller and it's going to test your brain to see that image. Same with reading. Try to play around with the distance and see if your brain can figure out the right focal point and support you reading there. And that's gonna, effectively keep that visual system working as best as possible as it can, in that kind of grey area. But as I said, if you do have a reasonable prescription and you need it to see in those distances, then you should be wearing your glasses and it's not going to make your vision worse.
It's a bit like physical health, really, isn't it? Sometimes sometimes you need to use something that's weak to make it stronger, but there comes a point at which you're not strong enough. And so it's probably just very similar to sort of physical activity, putting my physio hat on type thing.
Yes, totally.
Um, if there is one thing that we could all benefit our eyes from and our eyesight, what would it be? So, top tip from Druvin. What could we all do to benefit our eyes?
Yeah, and it's a bit of a holistic tip. And for me, especially now we're getting into longer and warmer days, it's having more natural light in our reach in our eyes. And simply put, when we go outdoors in the morning from when the sun rises to 11 a.m., go out, soak the sun in. Don't wear sunglasses. A lot of people, and I know, people that maybe drive or there's harsh, yeah, for driving especially. But if you don't need to wear sunglasses, please don't wear them in the morning because actually that natural sunlight does a lot of good for your retina, your eyes, and also your circadian rhythm. And in the same way, outside of those core hours from, I'd say, kind of 11 to 2 p.m., try to ditch those sunglasses again because there's a lot of beneficial infrared and light that can support your retinal and eye health and support your vision for the future. So I'd say, yeah, especially with spring and summer around the corner, soak up that natural vitamin D because it's not just for your mitochondria and body, but it's also supportive of your eyes as well.
Well, do you know, that is a tip I've not heard, so thank you for that one. I mean, I have to say I am bad about wearing my sunglasses, so now I feel slightly better as I go out in the morning without my sunglasses. So I feel a little bit better on that one. So
Brilliant.
that's great. Thank you for that. Um, shall we have a quick look and see what questions we've got? Um,
Yes,
I've
I'll just before we jump into Q&A, Catherine,
yes, yes, certainly,
I'm just gonna finalize with some three takeaways for folk. Because we've done a lot of talking,
absolutely.
Catherine, and I guess if there's any three things that we could advocate for folk to take away, it will be these three things. So the first and second here is really about systems, and I think systems and processes. I'm a very big fan. If you can in your organization create a system and process that allows folk to both from a eye strain and a DSE perspective to either self-report or regularly check in, that's going to serve you and your organization better versus just when there's an acute problem. And I know Catherine does a lot of work with organizations, and for DSE, folk are looking at employee setup when they're onboarding and then annually. In a similar fashion, what could you do when it comes to eyes and part of that process as well, and reminding employees to be proactive. And then lastly, let's make eye testing normal for all employees, not just those that are based behind screens. If we do have people that are engaging in machinery or in a warehouse or in logistics, if people can't see and they make a mistake, there's real big issues that can happen in the workplace. So how again can we take a bit more of a conscious choice to support our workforce, right? And then also use solutions like our screening solution to engage those that might not typically want to go for an eye exam because they maybe think their vision's perfect or that they don't need one. So I think these are the kind of three takeaways that I believe can help give you all something to think about and move forward to implement within your organization.
I
Um,
think that last point's really important, actually. Because we think about DSE and that's what we think about, but you're quite right. Lab workers, all these people who potentially their jobs are impacted because they can't work as efficiently because they can't see and they land up with eye strain and headaches. So I think that one's a really important one.
Yeah, totally. And even with the aging population, we know, the biggest cause of death, for example, is falls, right? And if you can't see, you're gonna be more likely to fall, for example, in some cases. So yeah, let's all remember to think about those eyes and get those eyes tested for people. Brilliant, Catherine. Yeah, let's head over to the Q&A.
Yeah, I'll take the first one because I've been asked about the views on DSC user using only a laptop screen, so without a separate monitor. Absolutely no. Using a laptop screen that's attached to a keyboard low, from a musculoskeletal point of view, is going to bring the head forwards, the back forwards, and is a hiding to neck and back back pain. So it's nothing to do with the screen. It's not really to do with the keyboard. It's to do with the fact them being joined together. And so either your arms have to come up or your head has to come down. So really trying to use a separate monitor is beneficial. And then you have also the benefits for a lot of people is that actually the screens get larger too, but that does depend on the tasks that you're doing. So I hope that answers your question on that one. Um,
Brilliant.
do you want to take the question about does the size of the screen have any bearing on eye health and eye strain, Drew?
Yes, so does the size of the screen have any bearing on eye health and eye strain? Um, yes, it does. I think we've got to be pragmatic here. You know, it's having reasonable sized screens, nothing too big, nothing too large, nothing too big, nothing too small. If you've got something small, you're going to be making the text size larger. If you've got something too big, you're going to make it smaller, you know. So what you need to have is something that works for you where we're at a certain length away, and I think actually t touches with another question from Jane around the screen at an arm's length. Yes, we should be having a screen at an arm's length, and the reason why I'm an advocate of having it slightly longer is because we all have a tendency to move forward when we're working, just a natural creep eat in, for example. But if we can be slightly longer than an arm's length away and you can see things clearly on your screens, then that's a good place to start and set up those that are working on screens. But yeah, coming back to Kate's question on screens and sizes, yeah, figuring out what's a reasonable size for you where you know the average font that's on screens for emails and wider is legible where you don't have to zoom in and move your position. That's what's really going to work for you in my perspective.
I mean, I try and get my fonts a bit larger, I have to say. My eyes, I like things to be further away, but I often have to make my fonts larger. And I do get a bit laughed at with the font on my phone too, because I like that a bit larger so I don't have to sort of peer down at it. So,
But that's it. Everyone's different, right? And it's taking that approach to saying what's going to work for you and cause the least friction to you day to day. But some people need something that's just easy and seamless for them versus having the right sized equipment in front of them. It's about what's seamless for them working every day.
yeah. I'll just take the one from Kate. Do the terms VDU and DSE mean the same thing? Essentially, yes. VDU, visual display unit, and DSE, display screen equipment, it's terminology really that has been used to around the regulations and that type of thing. But essentially, it is computer work. Essentially, I mean, there are some things around it, but when you see either of those terms, you can pretty much think of working with a screen. Right, let's have a look. What else have we got here?
And we've got a few eye related questions. So there's one
Hmm.
from Kirsty. Is there minimum employers should be paying towards glasses? Really great question here. Um, so you've got to look at the market and how much people have to spend or an organization has to spend to get those glasses. So the good news is you can get a full pair of spectacles from national opticians like a Specsavers for £50, for example. Vision Express is slightly a bit more expensive, £75. But if you embed a voucher scheme, so for example, we provide voucher schemes for Specsavers to corporates, and with a £22.50 eye care voucher, it includes £50 towards a full set of glasses. So as a corporate, you only pay £22.50, but if that employee needs glasses for VDU, that is included in that £22.50 spend, which I believe is a fantastic value for money for organizations. So you don't actually have to top that up with a separate budget. This is why we're an advocate of eye care voucher schemes for organizations versus you actually having your own processes because you'll you will increase cost savings for you as an organization, and which business doesn't like optimizing costs. So I think go down that route versus trying to set your own minimum and allowance because again it can get a bit tricky and employees may go off to their independent opticians where they can't get a full pair of spectacles for £50. They might have to pay more. So yeah.
Yeah. Um, I've got a question here from Norma. Any advice can you give on white desks and reflection from overhead lighting? Well, there's some simple ones is white desks and bright lights never mix. I mean, but obviously I would suggest looking at the lighting, asking for a lighting review. I have been in quite a few situations where there is just too much white and too much bright lighting. The other thing to say is, and I use this quite a lot, is you can get desk mats as well. So if as a sort of an instantaneous solution, if you get a desk mat of a sort of grey colour, something that actually reduces both the reflection and also reduces the contrast, that can be really helpful. But if in an area there's bright lighting and white desks, it's going to be problematic for everybody. So I suggest that you look at that. But a desk mat can be a good interim thing on that. Um, and I think Laura has had a very good point there, just talking about, getting off your screens during your breaks. And I would encourage people being a bit of a Luddite, as well. I sometimes will go down with a pen and paper and sit somewhere in a soft seating area to design a webinar I'm going to do or something else. And I'll start off with using a non-technical way to start off. And then I can maybe dictate my notes in later or that sort of thing. So I think we need to look for opportunities to step away from screens.
Yeah.
Of
So can I add to that, Catherine,
course
as
you
well?
can. Please
Yeah,
do.
I just think organizations now, if they can foster some form of way where employees, whether it's in their canteen or lunch break environment, where they have something to do that doesn't mean they have to go on their devices. Of course, if you're going to be having lunch with your peers or around peers, it's going to force you to stay off your screens. But independently, most people, let's be honest, if you're sitting by yourself or not, now people just pick up their device, right? And they want to decompress by being on their device, but actually what that's doing is it can add more strain again to your visual system, but also what you're looking at there on your screen. It might cause some anxiety depending on if you're getting any personal messages around something or whatever else, right? So I think if you can create a space where employees can engage in their breaks, where it gives them something to do that's not on their device, it's going to help them and your teams as well.
I think I mean, at Posturite, we've had a refurb, and we have a no eat policy, not no eat at your desk policy, and we have a communal area, and we all eat there, and we chat far more now. I mean, I'm not saying people don't use their devices at times, but we interact far more without a device than we ever have before. So there are little things that we can do without being prescriptive and
Yeah.
being prohibitive. We can just sort of create an environment where people do things that are less screen heavy, and not affect our efficiency. Right. Oh gosh, we've got lots of questions coming through. We have to have a quick look.
Can a rimming glasses for either distance? So I've got a question here. Can a visual ad from Angie? Can a visual ad be incorporated into glasses for either distance or near vision, or only near, I believe, is the question there. So a visual ad can only be added to a near prescription. You can't add that traditionally to a distance. So go on,
What
Catherine.
is a visual ad? I don't know. I don't understand the
Right,
question.
yeah, very good point. This is all optician lingo. So it's when you go to the opticians, they go, oh, okay, for reading and computer use, we feel that you could, as well as on top of your prescription, we feel you can benefit by having zero point 0.5 or 0.75 positive diopters added to your prescription, because what
Okay.
this does is this again helps your visual system to work close up. So there's lots of research that's supporting that actually having that can reduce some of the burden on your visual system. So I do think it's a net positive if you are being suggested that, or if not, speak to your optician about that, and they can just help bring things more into focus.
Sorry, and I disrupted you. So can it be incorporated into near and distance, or is it only near?
It's only for near, and I wouldn't recommend it for distance, because yeah, you want your eyes to, in the way they work, you want your eyes to be able to refine and focus in on distant objects without a near it. Yeah, so just for near.
Okay. So any advice on multiple screen setup? We advise on an optimal two and three screen positioning setup would help to check. Okay, I mean, for me, it's always worth, again, coming back to understanding how people work. And the screen that you look at most should be the screen directly in front of you. You know, you should not be getting the body to twist or that sort of thing. So understanding how people work, but also perhaps making sure people know how to split their screens and put multiple things on to bring things into the place. Again, that could be a training thing. It's amazing how much we assume people know. And trust me, I know because people assume I know things and I don't. And then I say, oh, it'd be really good if I could do that. So, yes, I think you need your main screen directly in front of you at usually an arm's distance or slightly further away. Obviously, there is some leeway on that, and then your secondary screen on your favorite side because we do have a favored side, and then your if you have got a third screen, probably on the other side. Obviously, there are caveats to that. If you have an enormous middle screen, that's going to put the side screens way out of the way. So again, we have to have a bit of common sense in that too. And then with an ergonomics hat on, if you've got a screen that has vital emergency information, but it's not used that often, that really needs to be within your clear visual field too. So that might actually be above or something like that. So I hope that makes sense. Main screens in the best place, I think, is your starting point, and then look for reasons to go elsewhere. I don't know, Drew, if you've got any other points on that.
No, that's all good. That's all good. And we'll finish off with one final question before we close, and that's from Helen. Any tips on managing the risk to eye health in large open plan hot desk in offices with aircon? Yes, I mean when we look at screens, we only blink 3 to 5 times a minute. We should be blinking 15 to 18 times in a minute. And what happens is this dries out your tear film, your eyes, and they start feeling all dry and itchy. Um, on top of that, adding aircon, which creates an environment which is very dry, this is going to continue to impact individuals. So what we need to be doing there is potentially there's is it humidifiers that add moisture back into the air? Catherine's noise, so I think I'm the right one. I think that there's processes that you can do around that. You can also do simple things like put a post-it note on people's laptops that they have to do themselves and just like blink. Blinking consciously improves that lubrication aspect of their eyes. And then also eye drops. For example, we produce and sell eye drops, and using eye drops and eye sprays can help day to day in an environment like that. Um,
Can I just make a sort of little push for biophilia as well? Plants and things can really help with the humidity areas too. So okay, you don't want uncontrolled jungles, but I mean I think there is certainly a lot that biophilia can do for us too.
Brilliant. Thank you, Catherine. Well, look, guys, we're at time. Thank you so much, Catherine, for joining me today. If there's any other questions, hopefully Catherine doesn't mind. Her email's here, and so is mine. Please do send us a message, and of course, you can contact your Posturite account managers or Ocushield account managers as well. We have one more webinar coming up, and I just need to remind myself of the date, 31st of March. Hopefully you can see my screen, but we'll share this material which has a link to it as well anyway, where you can join a few more experts talking about screen stress and sleep as well. Any final remarks, Catherine, before we log off here?
No, I think actually it's reminded me of a few things I need to get on and do. Like all these things, the to-do list never gets shorter, does it?
It doesn't indeed. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day and enjoy the sunshine.